Greetings, friends, and a shout out to all of you who are struggling with depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, bipolar disorder. Today I want to talk a little bit about mental health and meditation or spiritual practice. So the reason this is so salient and fresh and crisp in my mind, this issue, is because Tony, my girlfriend, and I have a friend. And she's been in a relationship for a long time with a guy whom I like very much, but the relationship has been fraught. And we thought it was just kind of a bad match, a stormy match, two personalities that didn't quite click, but two people who really care about each other. But it turns out this gentleman is suffering from major mental health issues. Now, over the past, I guess it's been about a week now, as it's been coming to light that this boyfriend is troubled and has some mental health issues, Tony's jaw has been on the ground and she's been dragging it around 24/7 because she hasn't known many people in this situation. Me, being a Zen student and a former monk, we had lots of people who came to the monastery and then had breakdowns at the monastery and manifested mental health crises at the monastery. This is not surprising. People don't come to a monastery or do serious spiritual practice, meditation, this kind of work because they want to celebrate how well their life is going. People come because they've got a deep unsatisfactoriness. So this was my experience over many years at the monastery with kind of the reason why people wind up at a place as extreme and intense as the Mount Baldy Zen Center was. It was dukkha, which is the Sanskrit term, suffering of a certain kind. I mean, I went to the monastery because nothing was working in my life. I could not commit to and settle into a career path and family, wife, kids, that sort of thing. I had too many questions. So we all bring our own plate of suffering and narrative around that suffering to the monastery. But there was always a general unspoken and sometimes spoken understanding amongst the monks and the priests that a monastery was a place where basically mentally healthy people came to push themselves beyond themselves. That was the understanding, but of course in reality and in practice, that isn't what always happened. Even amongst the monks and nuns and people running the place. I mean, frankly, honestly, we were all a little bit crazy, and some of us more than others. But the reason I think we said this was to kind of establish a framework for practice and to sort of set the ground rules. The idea was that you're bringing your best self to practice so that you can give that self away. The reason we said, hey, you need to be clear and standing on mentally, psychologically solid ground when you come to practice was to get rid of this idea that Zen is gonna fix ya. Because a lot of people came to a Zen center with that idea, buried somewhere in the back of their subconscious, or maybe not so far in the subconscious, was this idea that finally I'm going to get fixed. This practice, this tradition of Buddhism addresses the problem of suffering. Finally, I'm going to fix that thing inside of me that I know is there, that I can't get at, but I'm gonna find that thing, take it in my hands through this practice and put it back, like unbreak it so that finally I'm whole and I can begin living my life for the first time without all this suffering that I'm making happen. Me, totally uniquely, unlike everybody else in the world who's totally normal and totally fixed. But Zen practice, meditation, mindfulness, like real, authentic spiritual work, it doesn't, quote, fix you. Living in the present moment is hard because it requires us to accept the fact that things are never going to be perfect. This is it. This is what it is. The present moment is a terrifying place. Anything can happen, and for sure we're vulnerable, we're unprotected, we're imperfect, and nothing will change that. Making peace with this fact and learning to trust life and trust that all of the things that we're afraid of and that we don't understand, it's part of the Dharma, the teaching, the fact, the big picture, and it's okay. Arriving at this understanding, making peace with it, and then being energized by it, this is I think the point of and the fruits of meditation and practice, not fixing ourselves. Everybody can do what I just talked about. We can live selflessly, wisely, fearlessly, lovingly in the present moment, meeting reality as it is, making relationship and dissolving our ego and our limited, small I am self in whatever activity we're doing completely. Anybody can do this, from Mother Teresa to Adolf Hitler to Idi Amin to Johnny Depp to Amber Heard. This is our birthright as human beings. Hallelujah, human condition, anybody can do this. But the thing is, in my experience, sometimes we need a little bit of help. Sometimes you need help. It feels good to say that. And now I sort of feel like I'm gonna start walking back everything I just said. Like, you bring your best self to practice. Well, you know what? You bring everything to practice. You bring your shitty self, you bring your beautiful self, you bring your daydreaming self, you bring your sick self, you bring your well self, you bring everything to the cushion, first of all. And second of all, this idea that we had of Zen practice is for mentally healthy people who want to push themselves beyond themselves. In a sense, that was to weed out a certain type of student who, as I said earlier, was coming strictly to fix themselves or to meditate their way into mental health, because that never happened. I mean, in some cases, meditating, sitting down, doing zazen, doing a long Zen meditation retreat seemed to sometimes have almost the opposite effect on people. All their stuff would start coming up. And I mean, we had people who had paranoid schizophrenic diagnoses that we didn't know about, who would start seeing like Makyo, demons and angels in the room, right? Because they were just forced to sit there and this stuff would come up. So no, it wasn't the cure for a mental illness. And that's why we were kind of so strict about, please don't get the wrong idea about practice. But as I just said, everybody at some point needs some help. And mental health, in my experience, this is not brain science, but it's on a continuum, right? I mean, I wrote about this on my Patreon page, which you can go to. I'll leave a link in the description. I had a student once who had a serious breakdown. I think she was bipolar with schizophrenia. And right in the middle of a retreat, I went down to the Zendo because I heard somebody, it was in the middle of the night and we were at our city temple. I heard somebody down there and she was in the Zendo dancing, crying and laughing and dancing. This beautiful, wonderful young woman. And the next day, so we kind of calmed her down, and then the next day she had lost it. So we had to actually take her to the mental health ER. There is such a thing, I didn't know this, in Los Angeles. So she was trying to jump out of the car as we were driving her there. We had to have her involuntarily committed. And of course, then they gave her medication, they kept her there, therapy, everything. I think it was for a week. That's one extreme on the mental health continuum. Along the way, there's all sorts of help that people need. I've got a friend who works at a nonprofit. It's a very progressive nonprofit, and he's a little bit intellectual dark web-y. So every once in a while, he'll just send me an email ranting about these woke people, ranting about vaccines, ranting about liberal progressive America. And I receive his ranting, and then I'll just send him back an email to indicate that I've heard him, I'm listening to him, I agree with you on this, you might want to think about this on this topic you brought up. Sometimes people just need to be heard, just need to have something they're thinking heard, felt, maybe reflected back to them. So there's a huge continuum on the mental health spectrum. There's a huge variety of ways that we're all kind of unwell, and ways that we all need help. At this point, it may seem like we've got two completely contradictory concepts here in this Zen teaching salad that I presented you today. On the one hand, put simply, everybody needs help sometimes. And most of us in one way or another need help all the time, okay? And on the other hand, we've got this Zen teaching principle of bring your best self to the meditation cushion, and Zen practice is not going to cure you, heal you of your mental illness. You're supposed to push yourself beyond yourself. So we have these two different principles right here. Well, in Zen, this is often how it works, at least in the style of Tathagata Zen that I was raised in. My teacher called it plus minus zero Zen. Male, female connection, right? Left, right, up, down, north, south. Life arises from the friction of contradictory energies. He used to talk about how the very self is the friction or the cleft between inside and outside, right? So contradiction is not a problem in the style of Zen that I was taught in. In fact, in the Zendo, we had officers, monks, nuns, priests, students, who manifested the different styles of energy, completely contradictory or opposing and complementary, that we needed in order to make our retreats work. So we had the shoji, who was the soft, feminine, caring, womb-like, heartfelt energy, who would take care of the students, i.e. give them help. And then we had the Jiki-Jitsu, who was a strong, driving, proactive, expansive, little bit asshole-ish sometimes, male energy that would push people, right? So we had these two different energies at play in the Zendo. And I realize some of these terms and ways of speaking about it are maybe a bit anachronistic and sexist, but there it is. That's what we had at our monastery. When you've got your own Zen practice, your own meditation practice, I think it behooves you to make sure you've got a balance of these energies. So in my experience, people that are drawn to Zen practice, drawn to meditation, at least some of the more sort of intense Rinzai Zen type versions of meditation, they tend to err on the side of like meditation is everything. I don't need psychology. I don't need therapy. I don't need medication. Forget it. I am going to solve my problems through the spiritual discipline. And while I have complete sympathy with that energy, and in fact, when I came to the monastery many years ago as a young man with a dream, I had a bit of that energy myself, but I saw enough people pass through the monastery with mental health issues to finally it penetrated my rock hard head where I realized, no, it's perfectly okay, and it's not a failure of practice or of personal character or a failure of any kind when someone needs medication or therapy or just a shoulder to cry on, you name it. People need help sometimes, and that help is part of spiritual training, part of spiritual discipline. It's part of the discipline as a Zen student is that you learn to speak your needs to the shoji, the heartfelt, open, receptive person, role, character in the Zendo. You learn to express yourself to them when you need something. The way my mentor used to put it to me was, one time I was denying something that was going on inside me, that I was feeling some need that I had. And he said, don't do that. He said, your inner life has a life of its own. And if you deny it like this, it's going to get you. It's going to get revenge. It's going to get back at you. It's going to spring up in some typically Freudian way, sabotage you, and make itself known. So while people who do a ton of therapy, like the prototypical Woody Allen character who thinks they can solve everything by going to their therapist, I don't meet many people like that because I'm in a different discipline. I'm in Zen. While I don't think that therapy cures everything approach is sane or helpful, I also don't think the spiritual practice cures everything approach works either. Remember to try and keep it all in balance. Or the middle way, of course. And the middle way in Buddhism is not about like doing everything a little bit but nothing completely. It's about where all the different opposing energies and ideas and thoughts and principles come together, cancel each other out, and a complete decision is made, activity is made. Spontaneous and usually correct. So I hope that was helpful. It's a given, especially if you're drawn to stuff like meditation, that you're going to hit some rough patches in terms of mental health sometimes. It's going to be worse for some people than it is for others. No matter what, you can practice through bad times. So meditation is not about, I should be feeling a certain way. Why am I seeing demons? It's more like, oh, there's demons. Noted. Back to my breath. And, hey, demons, maybe I should take some medication, go see a therapist. As I've said in the past, meditation and Zen is about being completely in the present moment and giving yourself to the activity you're doing so that there's no thinking, no demons, no good, no bad, no crazy, no sane, just complete connection. So that's what we're all about here on the Zen Confidential channel, complete connection. Speaking of connecting, you can go down to the video description below and find a PayPal link if you'd like to connect with me there. That would be nice. And Patreon as well. I've got a bunch of essays and videos and blog posts up on Patreon. I just throw this stuff out there for free. People come over to Patreon and help me out on PayPal, and I really appreciate it. I'm getting more people, and it feels like there's a good energy behind all this. So it inspires me every day when somebody supports me to sit down, my camera, and make these videos. So thank you, and I'll see you next time.